talk about fears. Let's talk about love. Yeah, I got fears, but I ain't got no love.
And that is Bobby Fuller and the Four. Now, to me, you know, similar to Buddy Holly, but you know what? That was his idol, so I mean, of course you're going to sound like your idols, and to me, there's nothing better than sounding like Buddy Holly. So, but let's not dwell on his musical genius. We're here to talk about his death, which is very mysterious. It's something I've been pondering for a while now. A couple of things that just didn't make sense to me, but I think I kind of figured it out, hopefully. So, Bobby Fuller was 23 years old when he died on July 18, 1966 in Los Angeles, California. So I've been on this Los Angeles kick for a while. A lot of strange things going on out there. There used to be. Probably still is. But Bobby Fuller was an up-and-coming rock and roll star. His sound, like I said, was like Buddy Holly. He was from El Paso, Texas. So, I mean, he had that Texas twang to him. But he had a lot of the, I want to say, Richie Valens type of sound to him as well, which is ironic because I think Richie Valens was also signed to the same record label that Bobby Fuller was. But let's get down to the crux of this case. Well, Bobby Fuller had a hit song, which was I Fought the Law. What a lot of people don't know is I Fought the Law was actually written by Sonny Curtis, who was a member of the Crickets with Buddy Holly. I don't think Buddy Holly ever recorded the song. He was gone during that time period when Sonny Curtis wrote it and the Crickets recorded it. But regardless, Bobby Fuller made it a hit, and it was his #1 biggest hit. But when he moved from Texas to Los Angeles, he was looking to be the next big thing. But on July 18th, something happened. And his body was found out in front of his apartment complex in his mother's Oldsmobile, slumped in the front seat. Now, you got to remember I don't know the year of the car, but back then they were all bench seats mostly. So he was down and there was a can of gasoline on the floorboard, and it had a hose attached to it, like a rubber hose. There was reports that he was beat up, there was blood, and his finger may have been broken, and he was drenched in gasoline. The original cause of death was suicide. Not long later, I'm talking within a year, I think, it was changed from suicide to accidental. Now, this is one of those cases where I'm going to have to sit here and talk this out with you guys. So what I want you to do is see where I'm going with this and if it makes sense to you. Let's start first, like we always do though, with victimology. Especially when you're looking at suicide, you want to know, hey, is the guy suicidal? Well, listen, I've done a lot of cases where people think that it isn't suicide, and it is. I worked for a senator one time. He hired me about his daughter's death and didn't believe it was a suicide, and he swore up and down it wasn't. And when I looked at it, it was clear-cut suicide to me, and I gave him every indication why. They still wouldn't accept it, and that's okay. That's okay. I understand that. But that happens a lot. A lot. So just because when you talk to the family members and friends and they say, well, Bobby Fuller wasn't suicidal, you don't know that. You don't know that. People say Robin Williams wasn't suicidal. There's a Chris Cornell. I mean, you can have your opinions about that. Same with Kurt Cobain. I mean, you don't know what's going inside the head of somebody. You really don't. A lot of times when people commit suicide, they don't want to worry their loved ones, so they're not going to tell them that they're thinking about it. Sometimes they won't even leave a note. They'll just do it. Okay, it happens. Now, I'm not saying that's the case here, or in Kurt Cobain, or any of them. I don't know. I haven't looked at them. But I'm just saying peripherally. So you can't dismiss Bobby Fuller's death as not being a suicide just based off of people saying he was not suicidal. By all indications, he seemed very happy. Again, he was up and coming. Yet, after his hit single, I Fought the Law, and the law won. He had another album that did not do so well. Hey, that happens too. Are you going to kill yourself because of it? Maybe some people are. Right off the top of my head, I just think of like Candlebox. You remember that band? Great first album in the early 90s. I want to say 94, 93. Second album, not so good. Slaughter with Mark Slaughter. Remember that? First album great. Second one not so great. Subsequent ones not even worse. So I mean, it happens. But maybe this bothered him a little bit more than usual because he had just canceled a show, and I believe it was in San Francisco, in which some people lost some money. Now, when there's a death, we know that it's either natural, accidental, suicide, or homicidal. It's our job as investigators to try to figure out which one it is. So, we cannot rule out suicide yet, just based off of victimology and things we know. He seemed to be happy. He didn't have a steady girlfriend, but he had somebody he was seeing. There was rumors that she was tied into the mob. Listen, with famous cases especially, you are always going to have rumors. And they feed in, okay? You have to strip out those rumors. Get rid of them. They don't matter. Yes, I'm saying they don't matter. Now you're sitting there, some of you conspiracy theorists, and saying, well, they all matter. You have to... Listen, they don't matter. They will matter if we come to a part of the investigation that leads us down that road. Until that time, they don't matter. What you have to focus on is victimology, his death, the actual crime scene in the car, a little bit on statistics, and by that I mean, okay, if you're saying that he died by suicide, and the suicide measure is actually gas inhalation, asphyxia, well, let's check out the statistics on that and see how many people actually, number one, died through inhalation of gas. Two, let's break that down even further to how many people died from inhaling gas and committed suicide. Well, I would not be the investigator I am if I didn't already have the answers to that. And the answers are very little. Now, natural gas, the kind that is pumped into your stove and heating in the house, yes, that happens. But gas, fuel, to die of that gas inhalation is very rare. It happens, but not very often. And in fact, I have some experience personally, not me, with individuals that I know inhale gas on a regular basis. Now, remember, I used to work at a juvenile group home. Gas is, I guess you could say, people like to say gateway drug. That's what they say marijuana was, blah, blah, blah. It's not. You experiment with different things, and you'll start off with the most easiest thing that you can get a hold of. Sometimes it's a pen, you know, one of those markers. Then it progresses to aerosol cans and gas cans and marijuana and whatever they get their hands on. But I know people that sniff gas a lot. A lot. Where it messed up their mind. You know how many died of that? That I know of? Big fat zero. Doesn't mean it doesn't happen. I'm just saying it's odd. Now, the biggest clue that we need to look at is his body. And how it is found. What is going on with it. Now, I can only read like 1.5 pages of the autopsy report. I'd like to get it all. I know it's out there. I did read the death certificate as well. And, well, before I get into that, I just skipped over a huge section which we need to talk about before we can get into this, right? After victimology, I always do the timeline, right? Sorry. I don't know where my mind is today. Timeline. Very important. Before we get into the big clue, which is the crime scene itself, if it is a crime scene. He's at home, in his apartment, with his mom. 2 different accounts. I read that his mom was visiting him. The other one is his mom was living there with him. Regardless, she was there. He received a phone call at like 2:30 in the morning. What I'd like to know, was he asleep or was he awake when this phone call took place? Because he left. He said, I got to go somewhere, I'll be back. Now, if he was asleep and he left, that tells me one thing. It tells me that he wasn't expecting a call and it was something of an urgent nature that he left, right? If he's awake and he gets that call and leaves, well, maybe he was already expecting that call. See how the little things like that are very important? So you as an investigator on scene and you're talking to his mom, you don't leave with just the answer, he received a phone call and left. Well, do you know who it was? No, I don't. Okay, thank you. You got to go deeper because it means a lot more. Hey, was he asleep? What was he wearing? Was he in his pajamas? Was he dressed up? Things like that. Did he have his shoes on? Very important. So I'd want to know those things, but we don't know them. At least I don't know them. All I know is he got a phone call at 2:30 and he left. I'm assuming she went to sleep and she wakes up, he's not there. She says she keeps checking the parking lot for the car. The car never shows up until 5:15 p.m. She goes out to check the mail. She sees the car there. Some reason she goes out to check the car. I would want to know that. Hey, you see the car. Why are you going out there? Is it because he hasn't come into the house? What's the reason? Why'd you decide to go out and check it? She goes out, opens the front seat or looks in the front seat and she sees her son, Bobby Fuller, dead on the front seat. She notices a pungent odor of gasoline. So your time frame is 2:30 in the morning, right? Until 5 p.m. in the afternoon. That's a pretty big time gap. Now, the biggest thing is, I said about the vehicle and the body obviously in the vehicle. But the vehicle itself, I have a hard time with the vehicle not being there all those hours and then showing up with a body in it. Okay, to the layperson or just common knowledge, you're going to say to yourself, well, a dead man can't drive himself back to his apartment. He was already dead. Yes, I would agree with that. But I have a harder time believing this. Well, maybe not a harder time. Pretty hard for a dead person to drive back. But I have a very, 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 very hard time believing if this man was murdered, that he was killed off-site, meaning out of that apartment grounds. Whoever did it placed him back in the car, poured gas on him, placed the gas can in the car, drove that back with that smell and everything, and parked it there. Didn't happen. Think about that. That does not make sense. Let's take out the gas part about it. Let's say Bobby Fuller gets a call at 2:30 and he goes to... What would make you leave your house at 2:30 in the morning? Women, right? Us guys. If a woman calls you at that time, you know, depending on the woman, you're going to go. That's my first thought. 2, friend. Male, female, doesn't matter. Friend calls you. Hey, if you're restless, if you want to do something, you go. Or if that friend needs help, you go. I think about the gas can and how that comes into play. Whose gas can was it? The mom should know that. Inexplicably, the police threw away the gas can. Took it out of the car and threw it in a dumpster. It was witnessed by Bobby Fuller's manager who was there. Do I have a problem with it being thrown away? Yes, I do. Yes, I do. At the very least, I'm not even talking about fingerprinting. Looking for latent prints. Photograph. Please tell me they photographed the scene. The car as it was. I would hope they have done that. If they didn't, that's a travesty of justice. Even if it was suicide, you still have to document it. Alright, let's get back to my scenario. Even if the gas was not involved, let's say Bobby Fuller leaves his house after getting a phone call. He goes to wherever he goes and he's murdered. Or it's an accidental death. It doesn't matter. Even suicide, let's say. Why? Why would somebody place him back into his vehicle, drive that vehicle to his apartment building? That doesn't make sense. I'm taking out the gas completely. Why would somebody do that? The only reason you would do that is because you knew the person and you knew the connection that they had with their mother and you knew that she was there and you're driving it there in order for the body to be discovered. That's the only reason you do that. I don't see that in this case, so that's... And I'll tell you why I don't see that in this case. That's so risky. Okay, let's say at 3:30 in the morning, 4 a.m. in the morning, 5 a.m. in the morning, you drive the car there with a body in it. That's not as risky, right? Not as risky. It's still, there's an elevated risk. But you're talking broad daylight. Broad daylight. 5 in the afternoon. You're going to drive a car there with a body in it and park it there and then get out and hope nobody sees you. Why? Why would you do that? That makes zero sense. Justice. It's my dog again. Not snoring this time, bathing himself. I'm sure you heard that lapping. What are you doing up there? It's not bath time. Gotta love dogs. Luckily, justice doesn't take me away from my train of thought here. It doesn't make sense. If it doesn't make sense, then it didn't happen. Nobody drove that car back with a body in it. No. I don't believe that for a minute. Let me tell you what I do believe, though. He was seeing somebody, or went and saw somebody, yes, with a phone call. But whoever was responsible, if there was somebody responsible and it wasn't suicide, it was somebody from that apartment complex. Okay? You're looking too far out. You got to narrow your scope. It makes sense that it happened there. Because you're eliminating the possibility that somebody would drive that car. And they wouldn't. And I'm saying again, you throw the gas into it. Now let's say they drive Bobby Fuller's body back to the apartment complex. Then douse him with gas and leave the gas in there. Yeah, okay, that's a little, I get that a little bit, but it still makes no sense, because why would you do that? If you kill Bobby Fuller somewhere else, why not just leave him there? Or drive, if it's a crowded area, you drive 100 yards up the road. Why take him all the way to his house, to his apartment? That makes zero sense. Now, let me tell you what I think happened. And again, this is just off of a preliminary, digging. There's mafia-related things that, and his manager having a life insurance policy on him and all that. That's, again, you're searching for a motive when you don't have to search for a motive. Listen, when somebody dies, you can come up with 100 different motives as to why you think it is, and then chase it backwards. And that's not how professional investigations are done. Okay, you look at the scene, you see what you have, you start deducing possibilities to probabilities. What it tells me is Bobby Fuller was with somebody there at that apartment complex. Okay? There was some sort of, let's say this, I don't believe it was suicide. Okay? Let's get that out. Okay? I'm sorry that I didn't announce that sooner. I'm sure you could tell by my tone I probably don't believe that. But it's certainly one that I looked into, because the mom was quoted as saying he was despondent. Well, you dig a little further than that and you find out that the mom didn't actually say that. That was misconstrued. Upset. Well, big deal. I'm upset. I'm upset every day. If you find me dead tomorrow, it ain't suicide. So don't go to the paper and say, well, he said he was upset. He was despondent. I'm not. Okay? Relax your shoulders. Take a deep breath. And look at things with clear eyes. No bias. No black clouds of rumors. You have an individual dead in his mom's car, slumped over, gas can in the front seat. He's doused in gas. It's not suicide. Now, his injuries are obviously very, very important in determining what happened to him. The brother who saw the body said there was a cut on his head. There was petechial hemorrhaging of the chest, neck, and I want to say eyes. That is indicative of somebody being strangled. Now I'm not sure about the eyes. I'm not sure if that's, I don't have eyes written down here. I have petechial hemorrhaging and bruising on his shoulders. Now, could that bruising be from a previous incident? I guess, but when it says excessive, Excessive bruising. It's not suicide. It's not an accident. This is a homicide. From what I see. No, again, I wasn't on scene. You know what I mean? It's very hard. And I don't like that. Sometimes people, you know, you weren't there. I wasn't there. I didn't see it. The cops did. Yet, Bobby Fuller's brother was there. Bobby Fuller's mother was there. Bobby Fuller's manager was there. They all saw it. So if they say that it looked like he was beat up, you know, I'd like to see the police report to see what that says. But let me tell you what I think happened. Okay, let's finally get into this. He gets a phone call at 2:30. I don't know if that phone call was from somebody in the apartment building or outside. That I don't know. But at some point, he makes his way back to that apartment building. And he doesn't go home. Maybe it's because he's partying. I don't know. I don't know what the reason is for it. But he ends up with somebody at that apartment building. And the altercation occurs there, in that apartment complex. And yeah, he was placed in his car, in that car, by somebody at the apartment complex. He was beat up and placed there. Now, why would they do that? Why place him back in his car? The only reason is because if you place him anywhere else from where he actually expired from, it points the finger at that person. Right? If it's in apartment A, you can't leave him in apartment A because that's your apartment. You can't leave him right outside your door, so you have to place him somewhere else. It would also tell me, possibly, that the offender didn't have a vehicle. Now, I'd want to know whether the keys were accessible to Bobby Fuller's vehicle. But regardless, what is the introduction of the gasoline? Could Bobby Fuller been getting high by sniffing gas? Sure, but I don't think so in this case. The reason I consider it is because it's in his car. And the windows are rolled up. And it's in July in Los Angeles. It's hot. And it maximizes the effect of the odor, you know, the intoxicants of the gas. He can't do that in his apartment, right? You know, his mom would smell it. So you do it out in your car. But it's her car. And that gas smell is going to be there. Now, if he was intoxicated, let's say he was drinking, and then he decided to do it, he's not going to be of the soundest judgment, and I get that. Yet I don't think that's what happened. I think the introduction of the gas is by somebody who intended on lighting him on fire after he was dead. I think there was an altercation. He was dead. He was dragged into his car, and he was doused with gasoline, and the other gas was set in the car. And why didn't it happen? You don't have to dig too deep. Maybe it's as simple as this. The guy didn't have a lighter. The guy didn't have matches. That simple. Wasn't planned. It's not premeditated murder. It happened. You're in a panic. Throw him in the car. Go to set him on fire. You know. I don't have any matches. I don't even smoke. So if I was looking for an offender, I would be looking for somebody in that apartment complex. I would say that didn't smoke, but that isn't necessarily true. He could smoked. He could have left everything up on his apartment on the table. And he didn't want to come back down because maybe somebody heard something. It could be that simple, folks. But regardless, I just don't see that it was a suicide. Not with the injuries that he had, the excessive bruising and the petechial hemorrhaging. I also read that initially gas had been poured down his throat, but that had been refuted later. There was rumor that he was going to an LSD, an acid party, but he had no drugs in his system. Now, he could have went to that party and something happened there. Yeah, again, I think we've deduced, I don't believe that, because there's no reason to drive him back to his apartment. It makes no sense. Think of this. When somebody kills somebody, let's say a husband kills his wife, where do they take the car? A lot of times. To an airport. Why? It blends in. Number two, they can say, well, her body's never been found. She got on a flight and she's gone. How many times do you take it to a loved one's residence? Let's say you kill your wife and dispose. Let's say you don't dispose of the body. You just put it in the trunk and drive it to your in-laws' house. Right? That doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. What makes sense is something happened at that apartment complex. I would have interviewed every single person at that complex in 1966. I think you would have found your answers there. You have a big star, up-and-coming star, so you want to look at money, right? Everybody wants to look at money, wants to look at the mafia. To a lesser extent, you know, a scorned lover. Now, I would certainly look at him meeting a woman, a married woman, or something like that, and the boyfriend giving him a beating and killed him. I could see that. But again, I think it's within that complex. You don't have to look much further than that. So, that's what I think happened here with Bobby Fuller. I'd like the police reports. I'd like the full autopsy report. But, again, you start deducing, I always say, you start off with so many possibilities, but then you just start deducing. What makes sense? The car driven back doesn't make sense. So then where are you looking? You know, the apartment complex. Okay, within the apartment complex, what are you looking for? Well, I'm looking for maybe somebody that's married, girlfriend's a little flirtatious, seen hanging around Bobby, things like that. And you start deducing possibilities to probabilities. That's how you find your killer. So, sad case of Bobby Fuller. Usually, I tend to agree a lot of times with these rulings of suicide and accident, but this one I don't. And especially because of the injuries that, even if he didn't have a broken finger, I've heard that that's been discarded too. So even taking that out, the excessive bruising on his shoulders, the petechial hemorrhaging, the cut on the head, that doesn't happen if you're inhaling gas. And we've already deduced that inhaling gas is not going to kill you. Not intentionally. I'm not buying that. Statistics don't bear that out. So to me, it's not accident. It's not suicide. To me, this was homicide. Look inside that apartment complex and you'll find your killer. That's last words from me, Kenny Mains. Hey, Mains out.